Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. The true test of intelligence isn't memory or knowledge, and in this case, knowledge of the discovery. It's other things like curiosity, imagination, being open-minded, and humble enough to think you might not be that smart. The last one is interesting. Humble people who think they're not that smart tend to be smarter than less humble people who think they are that smart. So what this episode is about is seeing how that works in practice. You might know what that means intellectually, this whole idea of, well, I'm humble enough to know that I'm not that smart. But how about being practical about it? And so that is what this episode's all about. We're going to take a question that is obviously relatively easy to answer in a discovery. It's also a question that I think most of us think we know the answer to. And the question is, at what time was Shanann's doctor's appointment on Monday, August 13th? And it's a question I've asked on Patreon, and you've kind of got the same kind of proportion or percentage of answers as the poll that I put on YouTube. You basically have most people saying 10 a.m., some people saying 9 a.m., almost as much as those saying 10 a.m., and then virtually none saying 9:05 or 9:15. So most people think it's 10 a.m. In this episode, we're going to go through the discovery and see what the answer is. And I'm obviously going to be showing you the pages in the discovery that refer to this specific question and kind of potential answers. But before we get to that, there are a couple of things I want to just mention. First of all, thank you to the 15,000 people who've subscribed to this channel. It's not quite there yet at the time that I'm recording this, but probably in the next day or so it will reach that level. So thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you for being part of True Crime Rocket Science. And I think now is maybe a good time just to explain the point and the purpose of True Crime Rocket Science in a little bit more detail. The idea of it is to investigate the reality of high-profile cases. You tend to have a media narrative, you tend to have the narrative of the perpetrator, you tend to have a law enforcement narrative, sometimes you have a court narrative, sometimes you have conspiracies and all that kind of thing. And the point of True Crime Rocket Science is to kind of go through all of that stuff, not ignore it, but kind of navigate through it and say, well, this is actually the reality, or this looks like what may have happened here. In other words, it looks at all the information and tries to say, okay, this looks like the objective truth, right? That's the attempt that is being made there. And you might say, well, so what? So what? So that's just your view. It's not so what, because we want to be able to do the same things in our lives with our realities, in terms of, can you tell the truth about another person, a person that's close to you, your partner, your children, a best friend, a boss, or whatever. If you're in a crisis like we are with the coronavirus, can you tell what the objective reality is? And this episode is in a little way showing the process of that, which is where you ask a question and then you try and find the answer. But part of finding the answer is also knowing the context. So intelligence isn't just having knowledge. So all of us might know the discovery. It's also having the curiosity, the imagination, and to some extent the humility to say, well, maybe I don't know everything here. And that is when and how you might learn something and also see a reality beyond what you think it is. And that's really what True Crime Rocket Science is about. Although we practice it in true crime, we try to bring it back to our own lives and apply True Crime Rocket Science in our own lives using some of the same systems. So let's just do it now with this particular question, and we're going to see how reality sort of starts to shift. Incidentally, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. You can use the hashtag TCRS when sharing, especially on Twitter. And let's get started. So if you'd asked me, what time was this doctor's appointment, I probably would also have said, like most of you, 10 o'clock. And I would, if someone said, well, no, I don't think it was 10 o'clock, then I would refer you to the discovery, and I would say, well, go to page 552, and there's a reference to Nicole Atkinson explaining to the police that she knew Shanann had scheduled a doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock that morning. So there you go. Isn't that, case closed kind of thing? And furthermore, Nicole Atkinson went to the doctor's appointment. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a second. But surely if anyone knew, it would be Nicole, right? On page 627, we have another reference, this time without the time, but just showing that Cassie also knew that Shanann had an appointment. Now, at this point, you might say, well, isn't this sort of QED? We know the answer. What's the point in kind of hanging around the discovery? Don't we know the answer? But if you are curious and you go a little bit further, let's say to page 656 of the discovery, there's an investigative supplement which is titled Follow-up on Shanann's Missed Doctor's Appointment, and the reporting law enforcement officers Matthew Saylor, based at Denver CBI, and he was the guy who did this follow-up in Erie. He went to the Centura Health Clinic, and page 658 takes us kind of through that visit. And he went there on the 15th of August, so on the same day as the confession, the Wednesday, also the same day that Kessinger spoke to the FBI for the first time. It was also kind of in the middle of the day. Saylor went to Erie and followed up on information that they'd gotten that Shanann had missed the doctor's appointment. This was probably information from Nicole Atkinson. The narrative goes that he arrived at about 11:45, so this is again close to the time that Nicole Kessinger was talking to the FBI. In other words, in the middle of the day, Wednesday. According to Saylor, he spoke to Susie Schnell at the front desk. Schnell confirmed that Watts had an appointment scheduled for 09:15 hours on the 13th of August. So that's the time that he confirmed in person, kind of after everything. So in other words, on the 15th, that's the time that he confirmed. And he says that Schnell told him Shanann didn't arrive for that appointment. Now this is where it kind of gets quite interesting. So first of all, this is our answer to the question. You had the Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent, Saylor, following up in person. He went to the clinic and found out the actual time was 9:15. Now, that is the time that I would say should be your answer on that quiz. That should be the answer, simply because it's the latest information and it's from the most credible source, a CBI agent, and he followed up in person and he spoke to the actual person at the clinic, and who would know better than that person, right? But this is where it kind of gets kind of interesting, and this is also where it's useful to keep an open mind. This is what we talk about with True Crime Rocket Science. You're going beyond just getting the answer to your question. You try and get the context as well. And we'll see also why, having gotten the answer, you do start to think, wow, maybe I don't actually know the answer here after all, even after getting this answer. So let me take you through that. So Schnell tells Saylor that the appointment was for standard gender and generic testing with Dr. Stephanie Traver, right? And this is where it gets quite kind of murky, is Shanann had actually gone for a gender test on, I think it was the night of the 8th of August. So they'd arrived back from North Carolina on the 7th, and then the very next day, but the evening of the 8th, which I believe was a Wednesday as well. It was a Wednesday. The next day was a Thursday, the 9th. That was the day of the doll in the twister blanket, and the day that Chris Watts deleted his Facebook account, and quite a lot of things happened on that day. Chris Watts said he wanted a divorce, then he changed his mind, then they were going to go to Aspen, and also just the same day that Shanann eventually committed to going away to Arizona. She wasn't sure about it, and that's something she did the next day on the 10th, which is a Friday. But if we go through 658 of the discovery, Schnell explains to the agent that half of the clinic is dedicated to general practice and the other half dedicated to obstetrics and gynecology. So in theory, Shanann could have gone there to check on her health in general. In any event, Schnell told Saylor that the appointment had been previously scheduled for the 8th of August and the 9th of August. So there'd been two kind of scheduled appointments. She then goes on to say that the previous appointments had been cancelled and rescheduled by Shanann. So what that's also telling you is that those appointments were made, cancelled, and then kind of made again, if that makes sense. Now, for those who followed the phone data review, you actually had Shanann sort of saying in the phone data review, I've cancelled, I think she said something like, I cancelled the gender reveal, or I cancelled the, I think the doctor's appointment to find out the gender. And at that point, Chris Watts was saying he didn't want the baby. So she sort of cancelled that appointment, but then she set it up again, kind of thing. And just this on its own, just the agent going to the clinic and finding out, wow, you made an appointment, you cancelled it, you made it again, then another appointment you didn't pitch up to. And the whole thing of going to the doctor is essentially documenting the development of this fetus that Chris Watts actually doesn't want. So he also doesn't want the fetus documented. And you may remember that he actually missed a previous appointment, according to him, because there was a storm. Probably that is why he couldn't make it, but he couldn't make it. And one wonders if he had made it on that particular date. I think it was somewhere around the 19th or 20th of June. If he had made it, would that have changed his feelings about everything? When he went on the 8th, I think part of that was maybe wanting to find out, whether there had been any damage to the child, because of course he'd attempted to bring about a miscarriage, and he was probably surprised and maybe shocked that there was absolutely nothing obviously wrong with the baby. And Shanann's life, I think, could have been in danger had there not being people at home looking, kind of babysitting the children, he may have been quite panicked and worried on that particular night. In any event, that's probably the night that there started being an uptick in his motive and his actions. So, just to conclude page 658, Schnell basically says there was a lot of sort of make an appointment, cancelling it, rescheduling it, but for the appointment on the 13th, she simply didn't show up or call. And I think that in itself would also be quite unlike Shanann. Now, interestingly, in the Sermon on the Porch, Watts never mentions that doctor's appointment. He doesn't sort of mention it as this was something Shanann should have done, A, because she was pregnant, but B, that was kind of scheduled for that day. And the reason he probably doesn't mention it is he doesn't want to highlight the fact that Shanann's pregnant. Nowhere in the first 7 minutes of the Sermon on the Porch or in the 8 minutes of the second section of it does he mention Shanann being pregnant or that she has a doctor's appointment. It only kind of comes up right at the end of the last 8 minutes where the journalist asks something about, your wife's pregnant, are you quite excited about it? And then he just says, I just want them back. He doesn't really acknowledge it. In fact, he sort of answers the reporter just going, basically showing that he doesn't want to talk about it. And so this is where things kind of get quite interesting, is the discovery itself refers to the time of the appointment as 10 o'clock, and I'm talking about in the warrantless arrest affidavit. So kind of in your official narrative signed by the judge, the reason why you're going to arrest this guy, you have the time specified as 10 a.m. In other words, although the discovery refers to different times, it even when it references itself, there's kind of an error here. Now, you can kind of, I guess, understand the error because the affidavit was kind of rushed. Now, bear in mind, Watts was arrested at 11:02 p.m. on Wednesday, August the 15th. I'm not quite sure of the legal side of things, but from what I understand, he was actually arrested without a warrant. Now, you could say they had probable cause because he admitted to bodies being there, and a body, I think Shanann's body was found at that time already, and he confessed to killing her. So, but the fact is, the warrantless arrest affidavit was actually only it was dated the 16th of August 2018. And so technically the affidavit only came out after the arrest. And I don't know, this is a little bit of a tricky area. I don't really know whether you could sort of argue that he was arrested before the arrest affidavit was kind of signed or whatever. Bear in mind that it was very late at night when he was arrested, and maybe that is why it's a warrantless affidavit. But it is a little bit irregular. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there is an error in the affidavit, and the reason there's an error is I think this affidavit was sort of rushed. It was sort of gotten first thing kind of in the morning on the 16th of August. And because of that, bear in mind, Saylor had gone to the clinic the day before in the middle of the day, and that is when he found out about the time being 09:15. In other words, because the affidavit came out at the 11th hour, you've got this information that's referring to the discovery, but it's actually inaccurate. Does that make sense? What's also interesting is in the discovery, the affidavit isn't signed or dated, whereas in the media narrative, it is. Also, from the copy of the affidavit that I'm looking at, it doesn't actually bear a judge's signature, but it does look like it is stamped by Jared R. Bakes, the public notary. And I'm wondering whether that didn't happen at the jail. There's also another reference to the 10 o'clock appointment on page 530 of the discovery documents, this time in an interview with McKenna Lindstrom. Now, I remember when I went through this, I was sort of scanning through it, and I sort of saw interview with McKenna Lindstrom, and I sort of looked down and I saw 10 a.m. and I thought, oh, did McKenna also think it was 10 o'clock? But of course, when you read through the details, it is Kevin Kobach reviewing what he knew at that point, and just saying that a friend of Shanann stopped by the home on August 13th, couldn't locate Shanann, and the friend knew Shanann was pregnant and had missed an appointment at 10 a.m., right? So there seems to be absolute clarity that Shanann, from Nicole Atkinson, that Shanann missed her appointment at 10 a.m. Why would this be so? Well, it could be that Nicole understood it as being from 9 to 10 kind of thing. That when she wasn't there up until 10 a.m., she kind of got worried. There's also another reference that I think is quite important to highlight. And this is from Cassie Rosenberg. It's from page 626 of the discovery, and now you have Cassie saying that Shanann was excited because she had a appointment at 9 o'clock in the morning. So this is the first clear indication from a witness that there's kind of a time contradiction. So you're getting quite a few confirmations of 10 a.m. from Nicole, and now Cassie's saying 9 a.m. So which one is it? So already the discovery is kind of acknowledging this kind of contradiction. Another aspect that I think is kind of features into this is Shanann had spent 6 weeks in North Carolina, where there's a time difference, and you're sort of wondering, well, did that factor into it? Did that time difference factor into this misunderstanding, if you want to put it that way? And then there's a final reference, actually in the phone data review, and this is on page 2122 of the discovery, and it refers to, this is on the 13th, at 9:05, Shanann's phone had an appointment reminder scheduled for this time. And this was for her medical appointment. And what this seems to show is that at 9:05, Shanann's phone was alerting her to her appointment. Now, she was giving herself effectively 10 minutes grace, so she would have known, well, you need to be at your appointment at 9:05. But if she was unaware or late, that would kind of give her an alert to that effect. So in other words, this alarm would have gone off 10 minutes early, and I don't think that the drive to the appointment was much more than 5 or 10 minutes. So if you check the address on Google Maps, it's an 11-minute drive from Saratoga Trail to Mitchell Way, where the clinic is. So basically, Shanann would know the minute her alarm went off, she needed to get in the car and leave. She would basically have 10 minutes to get there. And so I think that does confirm that the time was around 9:15, doesn't it? Now you might say the value in this exercise, is it really worth spending so much time just finding out that it wasn't 10 o'clock, it wasn't 9 o'clock either, it was 9:15. Now, the one way of answering it is most people who took this quiz were wrong, just in terms of that simple question. And if you can't get the details right, then how can you have any hope of getting the larger portrait, the larger image right, especially 2 years later, right? That's the one aspect. The other thing is to answer the question, was it really worth going to all that effort just to find out, well, it's not this time, it's that time? Well, so as someone who's written a couple of books on the case, I'm not sure that I even knew that there was this change in the appointments, that they were made, cancelled, made, and all that. And although it's not kind of rocket science necessarily, it does shake hands with the phone data review. And certainly we went through that in meticulous detail over the past 2 months. But it shakes hands with the thing, that the vibe that came through the phone data review, where Shanann and Chris Watts were arguing about whether they wanted the baby. And she also said in the phone data review that she'd cancelled the gender reveal. I'm not quite sure if she said she'd cancelled the appointment, but I certainly remember seeing something about that and thinking, well, if you said you cancelled the appointment, then I think you must have set it up again because it was there. And so what that shows, so even if we didn't have the phone data review, this would have been a mirror to that, proving or illustrating that there was some
10,
confusion,
9,
concern,
8. Go for main engine
some
start.
discrepancy,
6, 5,
some change
4,
of heart, change
3,
of mind
2,
about the
1.
baby. In other words, cancelling the appointment, setting it up again, cancelling it, and then not turning up for it. In other words, that alone would have given you information, even had there been no phone data review, indicating that something was up. Also, the fact that Chris Watts doesn't mention it at all would have indicated that. Now, once again, this isn't really to sort of showboat and say, I was right, you were wrong, or anything like that. It's to show the process of true crime rocket science, to say, maybe we don't know the answer here, let's go and check, right? It's not just checking that particular answer, it's also checking the context. Part of checking the context in this case was checking the distance from the clinic to Shanann's home, and shaking hands with the sort of idea of, was she using that alert to let her know, well, as soon as that alarm goes off, I need to get in the car. I'll have 10 minutes to get to the clinic. And that's kind of confirming the 9:15 thing. It's also confirming that Shanann's a very on-time person. And so what this exercise does is it helps us to crystallize. It helps for these pixels that we have, this basic idea we have. It just brings it into sharper focus. And it's something we need to do in a thorough way across the entire discovery, not just one little question. That's what I've tried to do. But the point of it ultimately is to look at how we do that and then address it in our own lives. And I mentioned this on Patreon yesterday, just that I applied that myself, where I had a question. I received an invoice and I saw a number that seemed strange, and it wasn't a very big number, but it was strange. And I then investigated it, and I then got an apology that it was in error. But it would have been very easy just to shrug and say, well, it's not really worth it, and maybe there's some explanation. But things like that we need to go and find the answers to, and it doesn't take long. We've got the technology now where you can get the information in seconds, at most a couple of minutes. And what you get in exchange for that little excursion is a stronger sense of reality, a stronger sense of control, a stronger sense of knowing what is really happening. And that is really the lesson of true crime rocket science, to say, let's find out what is going on here. Let's also be curious, and let's also assume that maybe we don't know. And in this case, I think many of you will agree, we've all learned a little bit, haven't we? I'm not going to take it any further than that. I will be analyzing the Netflix documentary, probably in small little parts. That'll be done on Patreon. I might provide a couple of teasers on this channel, but basically I'll be kind of just going through the documentary and just looking at what they're doing. It does look like it's being made by quite a good filmmaker, someone associated with Man on Wire, which I think was quite a good production. I've seen that. So it does seem to be, looks like it might be a quality production. And then from my side, the fourth book in the Two-Face series, Rape of Cassandra, it's also one of the highest rated books in the series, is now available in paperback. So you can head to Amazon to buy the book if you haven't read it already. So anyway, thank you for listening. If you'd like to join Patreon, there's now a discount available for annual memberships. So make use of that if you'd like to. It's Patreon/TCRS. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.